Zombies. Living corpses that multiply rapidly by destroying everything in their path. When you encounter them, you are usually left with only two choices: hide or die. Their decaying bodies may not be strong, but their numbers make them impossible to defeat by normal means. Our story takes place on an abandoned planet, one haunted by the Walking Dead, where no one willingly sets foot anymore. Three friends named Jamal, Protein, and Boomer were forced to make an emergency landing on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy after their ship malfunctioned. Now with rescue still far away, they must somehow survive for 100 days on this zombie-infested world. Jamal was the builder of the group, Protein was the sharpshooter, and Boomer was the old lady who also knew a thing or two about first aid. So aside from the fact that all three of them were completely naked, the only thing they really had in common was being sent on a planet full of zombies. And while each of them was a professional within their specialties, they depended on each other in order to survive. We also had a dog named Newton and just enough food to keep us alive for a while. And luckily, there weren't any zombies around yet, but that wasn't going to last forever. According to our calculations, the noise we made will bring the zombies to our location within 3 days, so we had no time to lose. Therefore, we had to build a shelter without wasting any time, because once the zombies arrived, staying out in the open would mean certain death. At the same time, the base we were going to build had to be effective against bandits as well as zombies. That's why we decided to construct our shelter inside the mountain. This way, we will make it harder for the zombies to see us and be better able to defend our base against bandits. While Jamal was digging into the mountain, Protein started hunting to stock up on food. Meanwhile, Boomer was wandering around aimlessly due to her Alzheimer's. This situation didn't seem like a major problem for now, but it was clear that once the zombies arrived, it will bring us a lot of trouble. Still, we managed to get through our first night without any issues. In the morning, we built a dormitory so we wouldn't have to sleep on the ground again. After that, we laid the foundations for a rice field, which will likely become our only source of food in the coming days. After that, a man named Lucifer attacked us on his own. Fortunately, he didn't have any weapon other than a simple stick, but the zombies could show up at any moment, and firing a gun while they were around wasn't a good idea, so we decided to send Protein outside the walls to deal with him quickly. Protein had managed to neutralize him. However, it seemed the bandit was still alive, and even though he had attacked us, we couldn't afford to turn down an extra pair of hands in a world overrun by zombies. So we decided to treat his wounds and bring him into the group. By now we were slowly approaching the end of our peaceful days. There was still plenty of work to be done, and it was only a matter of time before the zombies reached us. If we wanted to survive in the long run, we had to make some sacrifices. By the fourth day, zombies began pouring into the area from all directions. Their numbers were multiplying by the second, but we still had one major problem to solve. The north gate of the walls we had built to isolate ourselves from the outside world was not yet complete. Although we immediately decided to seal the gap, we quickly realized it was too late. The zombies had already arrived, and completing the wall with them around was impossible. We were left with only two choices: either lock ourselves inside the dark cave and wait to die of starvation, or fight the earth and try to push them back beyond the walls. As impossible as it sounded, we chose the second option. Either way, our chance of survival were slim, but we would rather die fighting than rot in a dark pit. Although we somehow managed to take down the zombies inside the walls, the sound of gunfire alerted the rest. More of them began rushing toward the area, so we decided to head out through the south gate, hoping at least to prevent more of them from flooding into our base. Once outside, the battle picked up right where we left off. Although their decayed bodies lack resilience, for every zombie we killed, two more appeared, making it impossible to defeat them by normal means. On top of that, after running for hours and being so hungry, we really thought we were done for. But just when it felt like we couldn't hold out any longer, a strange idea came to our mind. There were wild explosive clouds near our base. As their name indicates, these creatures cause a huge explosion when they die, and that explosion could also start a large fire. So in theory, we could try to burn the zombies by blowing up the cause. With no other option left, we decided to give it a shot. As planned, we managed to start a huge fire, and just like we expected, the zombies kept walking through the flames as if nothing was there. In fact, the burning zombies were carrying the fire to different spots, helping the flames spread even faster. Now, all that was left was to circle the fire and burn the zombies. Although our tactic was largely successful, our mistake didn't go unpunished, because Boomer, slowed down by old age, got caught by the zombies. We managed to save her at the last moment, but we couldn't prevent her from being bitten. On the bright side, Boomer was only bitten on her right leg, so by amputating her leg, we could prevent the virus from spreading through her body. But there was a small problem. Boomer was the only one among us who understood first aid, and it seemed impossible for her to cut off her own leg. Therefore, Jamal had to perform the surgery. Although it was very risky, we had no other choice. At the same time, Boomer had lost a lot of blood from her injuries. To increase her chance of survival, we needed to give her a blood transfusion before the operation. Fortunately, we had a donor available for that. After the transfusion, Jamal began the amputation without wasting any time. Miraculously, the operation was successful. Although Boomer would have to continue her life with only one leg, she was still alive. However, after sealing ourselves inside the shelter for the surgery, zombies that had survived the fire had reached our doorstep. For now, their numbers were at a tolerable level, but once we rested and regrouped properly, we had to clear them out and seal the breaches in the walls. Otherwise, the damage could be much worse than just losing a leg. Before we could fully recover, we were attacked by the planet's natives. Although the natives outnumbered us, they had a zombie horde to deal with before they could fight us. At that moment, we realized the zombies weren't entirely harmful, because these creatures saw all humanoid beings as food. In other words, they were enemies to our enemies as well as to us. Thanks to this, defending our base against raids became much easier. When the remaining locals realized getting in wouldn't be easy, they decided to flee. The next day, while we were trying to figure out how to escape from the place we were trapped in, we suddenly heard gunfire nearby. Apparently, a neutral group that had noticed our presence had come all the way to our base to trade with us, and this was the perfect opportunity for freedom. After helping them clear out the zombies surrounding us, the first thing we did was cut down some trees and seal the gaps in our walls. From that day on, we hoped to survive inside our secured walls without being noticed by the zombies. Still, we had to be ready for anything, because next time we might not get off so easily. In other words, we had to improve ourselves in every possible way. We started by setting up a power source for our new base. We didn't want to remain in darkness any longer. Although survival was our top priority, we also had to hold on to our sanity until the rescue ship arrived. On the 18th day, we made our prisoner Lucifer an offer to join us, and naturally, since he didn't have any other options, he accepted. From that day on, Lucifer will be our new researcher, but at the same time, we also needed a cleaner. After all the chaos, we hadn't been able to do any cleaning, or rather, we had far more urgent priorities. Because on this planet, survival didn't depend on keeping our room clean. Still, from now on, we needed to be more careful if we didn't want to get sick. Then a few days later, we were attacked again by another group of raiders, but knowing how the previous attempts had turned out, we didn't even bother to get out of bed. After all, they had to get through hundreds of zombies to reach us, so there was no need to get our hands dirty. Once the raiders were all devoured one by one, we quietly scavenged whatever was left of them without the zombies noticing. Then we went back to expanding and improving our base inside the mountain. However, with each passing day, the zombie population in the area kept multiplying rapidly, and on the 26th day, something completely unexpected happened. Just as the zombies were about to break down the door, we quickly decided to barricade it. We discovered that once they reached a certain number, they could climb over each other and leap over the walls. It didn't seem like a major issue for now, but it was clear that in the coming days, it will become a serious problem, because the foundation of our defense strategy wasn't as reliable as we thought. While this completely undermined our plans, it was still better than finding out too late, because the alternative could have been far worse. Recognizing the weakness in our defenses, we focused on building the hydroponic systems we had just researched. This way, even in the worst case scenario, we would at least have our food supply covered. On the evening of the 29th day, we woke up to the noise and realized a slave trader had arrived in the area. With the money we had taken from the bandits who attacked us earlier, we decided to pay the trader to release the 17-year-old boy he was keeping captive. After all, in a world like this, money held no real value for us, and every additional member added to the group increased our chance of survival. The next day, 3 travelers in need of help entered our land. In exchange for shelter, they said they would assist us during their stay. Refusing this offer basically meant leaving them to die, so we decided to help the travelers. Then we opened suppressive fire on the nearby zombies, helping the travelers enter our base in one piece. This way, even if only temporarily, we could speed up our progress. However, the gunfire attracted a group of zombies right to our doorstep. Although we managed to take them down easily, we noticed one of them was different from the others. This zombie, covered in thick armor, was much tougher than the ones we were used to, but the heavy armor also made it slow and clumsy, so as long as it was alone, it was harmless. Still, its presence was a threat to us and not to be eliminated. Therefore, we went outside and took it down. After that, we sealed off the passage and continued with our work. By the 33rd day, a greyhound near our base had grown close to our dog Newton and eventually became tame, so we decided to name it Einstein. On the 34th day, we decided to reinforce our southern walls. Our goal was to make use of the stone blocks we had gathered from digging the mountain, while also fixing the storage limitations. For the next 3 days, we spent our time completing daily tasks like farming, construction, and research. While we had a feeling it was calm before the storm, we had no choice but to wait. On the bright side, we had uncovered the secrets of geothermal energy, a source strong enough to meet most of our energy needs. Thanks to this, we could finally build a freezer large enough for our group. But if we wanted to keep surviving, we had to think not only about hunger, but also about the security of our base. The most reasonable step was to place turrets around the base. After all, even though zombies reacted to sound, they had no intention of eating turrets. In other words, turrets were the best weapon we could use against them. But we had a small problem. As strong as geothermal energy was, a single source wasn't enough to power dozens of turrets, and within our safe zone, we only had one source available. In short, if we wanted to build those turrets, we would have to leave the walls for a while. At first, we thought about waiting for the right moment, but we didn't have the luxury of time. With each passing second, another zombie appeared out in the field, so if we didn't do it now, it would only become more difficult later. Despite the risks, we decided to go for it. After creating a small opening in the southern wall, Bliss started transporting the necessary materials, while the rest of us began clearing out the zombies. By keeping the zombies at a distance like this, we relied on Bliss to complete the power plant. In the middle of the fight, one of our guests, Evgeny, was caught by the zombies. His survival seemed nearly impossible, yet we couldn't bring ourselves to watch him being eaten alive. While the rest of us tried to push back the zombies closing in, his friend decided to carry him out and take him inside for treatment. But Evgeny bled to death on the way. Although we had nearly finished gathering the necessary materials for the plant, we couldn't continue the mission after that. One of us was gone, and the others were badly injured. We barely made it inside, closed off the passage, and began treating our injuries. But our problems didn't end there. We soon discovered that Bliss had been bitten, and it was only a matter of time before the infection took over. Thankfully, to avoid harming us, he decided to lock himself inside the bunker and wait for death in his final moments. Things had been going perfectly, but in only a few hours, everything had turned into a mess. One of us was dead, another had turned into a zombie, and the rest were badly injured. To make matters worse, the chaos we created had drawn more zombies to this location, but there was no way to rewind time, and for the rest of us, life still went on. So after putting the zombified Bliss to rest, we got back to work where we had left off. However, after losing 2 of her friends for nothing, Arenika was understandably blaming us, and she was dragging down the group's overall mood. She kept insulting everyone and starting pointless fights. Eventually, she couldn't take it anymore and decided to leave the group, and because of her recent behavior, no one tried to stop her. To fill the gap in our firepower after Arenika left, we decided to build 3 turrets around the base, but since our energy supply wasn't enough for now, we also made sure to take some alternative security measures, and it didn't take long for us to realize those defensive upgrades were among the smartest decisions we had made so far, because just 2 days later, hundreds of zombies had gathered at the southern front of our base, and it looked like they had no intention of leaving without a taste of brain. As expected, the living dead eventually began to breach our walls little by little. In other words, we had no choice but to fight. At first, we kept them from breaking through the entrance, but we knew that wouldn't last forever, so we decided to make a breach in the wall where the zombie presence was lighter, then go outside and repeat a tactic that had worked before. we had managed to reduce the zombie population for now. Even though some of us had mental breakdowns from non-stop battles, in the end, we had earned the right to survive another day. But if we wanted to live longer, we had to complete a mission we had previously failed. So while the number of zombies was still low, we decided to finish the geothermal power plant. After getting some rest, we left the base and carried out our plan. It wasn't easy, but we managed to set up the plant without losing anyone. Still, there was no time to celebrate, as the zombies were unpredictable and we couldn't afford to face another attack. That's why we repaired our walls and started installing the turrets we had been planning for weeks. After that, we returned to our usual routines and waited for the next encounter. In the days that followed, as everyone in the group became increasingly depressed, we realized something very important was missing. We had made progress in many areas, from renewable energy sources to turrets, but on this awful zombie-infested planet, there was almost nothing to enjoy. And the relentless stream of tragedies was slowly draining our will to survive. In short, we needed something to help us forget reality for a while, so we decided to start producing alcohol for ourselves. As long as we took it in the right doses and didn't get drunk, this seemed like the only thing that could ease our depression. From that day on, with our new source of motivation, we kept working non-stop and gathering resources for 8 days straight, until day 64. In the early hours of the 64th day, we noticed a desperate traveler named Gregor entering our territory. Apparently, he had heard about our community and wanted to join us. Trying to get him inside through hundreds of zombies was a huge risk, but we couldn't turn our backs on an innocent person looking for help, so we made a small opening in the wall to let Gregor through, then started clearing the zombies in front of the gate. Gregor managed to slip past the earth and get behind our walls, barely escaping a bite, but he had also drawn the attention of a massive number of zombies, and soon enough, what we feared most happened. Hundreds of zombies began gathering in front of the wall, and just like before, started climbing over it by using each other as stepping stones. But this time was different. The number of zombies pouring in was dozens of times greater than before. This meant we had to get to the shelter immediately. Everyone began rushing inside one by one, but Jamal was left behind. Before he could reach the gate, the zombies had already swarmed him. He fell to the ground completely surrounded, and that was the end for him. Even though we could hear his screams from behind the walls, there was nothing we could do. He had no chance of surviving that, but we had no choice but to wait for this nightmare to end. On top of that, we didn't even have time to grieve. The zombies had already managed to break through the gate. We tried to take them down one by one as they flooded through the corridor. After taking out the ones that got inside, we immediately began repairing the gate. During the firefight, we realized we had accidentally shot Einstein, and he died from blood loss. He had been a good companion until now. At the very least, our turrets were still operational and continued firing at the zombies outside. We hoped they would eventually clear out the area completely, but within a few hours, they ran out of ammo. That left us with no choice but to wait. During that time, we focused on fixing the walls and producing just enough food to keep us alive. We had basically started living a prison life within our base, but luckily, the hundreds of alcohol we had made earlier were still waiting in the storage. And since we had no other option left, alcohol became our only source of enjoyment. At first, it didn't seem like a major issue, but as the days passed, it started to cause problems. Even our dog Newton had turned into an alcoholic. At this rate, we were going to lose our entire colony to liver failure before the zombies could reach us. Thankfully, on day 80, a miracle happened. A trading group we had done business with showed up once more. With their help, we finally had a chance at freedom after all these days, so we decided not to waste this opportunity. After finishing off the last of the zombies inside the base, we sealed the remaining breaches in our walls, and after a long period of captivity, we rose from the ashes and began picking up right where we left off. Even though quite some time had passed, we hadn't forgotten about our friend Jamal. There was nothing left of him to bury, but we still came together to hold a quiet farewell. As we were saying our final goodbye to Jamal, we heard an explosion in the distance. It seems someone else had just made an emergency landing on the planet. Strangely, Lucifer claimed that he was his brother. No matter how much we tried to convince him otherwise, we couldn't stop him from going out to rescue him. After all, Jamal had died trying to save Gregor, and this time, the person we were trying to save couldn't even move, meaning someone would have to carry him. When Lucifer arrived at the scene, he managed to take down the zombie following him without getting bitten, then picked up his brother and ran toward the base. Luckily, the relentless rain covered the sounds they made, making the rescue much easier than the last one. Once inside, we placed Craig on the bed and began treating his wounds. The next day, we decided to try new defense methods against the zombies. Based on our previous experiences, we knew they weren't resistant to fire, but we couldn't afford to keep stepping outside and putting ourselves in danger each time we had to confront them. So we decided to set up a mortar, which was expensive but offered much greater safety. This way we could start fires and control the zombie population without ever leaving the base. After setting up the mortar, we fired a few test shots to test our theory. Just as we expected, the mortar made it easier to take down large groups of zombies, but we quickly realized we had picked the worst time to do it. Right after we wiped out the most of the zombies, a group of raiders moved into the area, and this time, we didn't have a zombie army to stop them, which meant it was up to us. By that time, Craig had recovered enough to stand on his feet. Even though he hadn't fully healed yet, we had to be ready for the incoming attack. There was no time to rest, but before we could finish preparing our defenses, we noticed something alarming. Apparently, when Lucifer went out to rescue his brother, our dog Newton had followed him outside, and without knowing, he was wandering straight into enemy territory. Even though Newton didn't do much besides eating and drinking beer, he was still part of our colony, so instead of staying back and defending the base, we decided to launch a counterattack. Unfortunately, we were too late to save him, but at the very least, we could still avenge him. After successfully repelling the attack, we realized the woman who killed Newton was still alive, so we decided to capture her for execution. It won't bring him back, but it might ease the pain just a little. By the time we reached day 86, we started to feel like our journey was coming to its end, but we couldn't afford to relax just yet, because with every new day, we were hit by disasters we never anticipated. For this reason, we began building a second shelter on the mountain west of our base. In the worst case scenario, we would be able to shut ourselves inside until the rescue ship arrived. After that, we spent a long time living quietly, farming, drinking, and using the mortar to keep the zombie population in check. Strangely enough, almost 10 days passed without anything remarkable happening. During this time, we also welcomed a woman named Wendy into our group. From that day on, we began to believe we wouldn't face any problems until the rescue ship arrived, but we were soon proven wrong. At sunrise, we realized our base had been surrounded by a large enemy group. When the raiders settled on the southern side of our territory and started setting up their own front, we decided not to waste any time and began loading ammunition into our mortar for a counterattack. Any small breach the enemies made in our walls will be enough to bring our end, because even if we manage to push back the raiders, we won't stand a chance against thousands of zombies that would follow after the fight. So before anything else, we had to break the raiders' siege. With the help of our flammable rounds, we managed to neutralize the enemy's mortars. The forest fire also worked in our favor by dividing the enemy group into smaller factions. While they were powerful when grouped together, they started dying off one by one once they were separated. Still, before retreating, they managed to destroy the power plant outside, but that was a small price to pay in exchange for winning the battle. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for us to realize the fight wasn't over. As new troops entered our territory, it became clear that what we had just faced was only a vanguard attack, and this time, the raiders had had decided to use a faster, more effective approach. From the looks of it, they planned to blow up the most vulnerable part of our base to get inside. And the worst part was, that area contained all of our resources. So even if we survived the attack, all the supplies we had gathered would end up out of reach because of the zombies. As much as it hurt our spirits, we couldn't just sit and wait to die. So we made a new plan. Using the mortar shells we had left, we set explosive traps where the raiders were likely to break through. Thanks to the traps we had set and the position we had taken during the battle, we managed to deal a major blow to the enemy. However, due to a breach in our northern wall, we couldn't hold that position any longer. To avoid getting caught in a crossfire, we decided to move to a safer spot. Meanwhile, Boomer was overwhelmed by everything that had happened and started having a heart attack due to her old age. And in the middle of the firefight, there was no way we could help her. And even worse, she was the only doctor in our colony, which meant she had to survive until we could push the raiders back. After hours of fighting, the raiders finally began to retreat, but we still had massive problems to deal with. First and foremost, we had to provide first aid to the wounded, but Boomer was our only medic and she was suffering on the floor. With our limited medical knowledge, we were only able to save Jenny, while both Boomer and Gregor passed away. Boomer fell victim to heart attack and Gregor died from blood loss. Still, we had no time to grieve. The gunfire could attract zombies at any moment, and they might start pouring in through the gaps, so we delayed the burial and focused on repairing the walls. After that, we finished off the injured raiders who were still inside the borders. Not long after, we realized Boomer had turned into a zombie, which meant we had to fight her. After Protein put her down for the second time, he crashed Gregor's skull to make sure he wouldn't suffer the same fate. Even though the battle ended in our favor, we had lost so much that it didn't feel like a victory. We had just watched two of our friends die in misery and could no longer reach our shelter since it was overrun with hundreds of zombies. And just when we thought we had solved all our problems, we found out Craig had been bitten on the arm. With no doctor left in the colony, we had no choice but to amputate it ourselves. He bled far more than he should have, but at least we managed to save his life. At sunrise, we decided to give our fallen comrades a proper farewell. After burying them, we returned to our daily routine as if nothing had happened. There were only 2 days left until the rescue ship arrived, and we could not give up after all we had been through. But even after everything, one final threat was still waiting for us. The zombies at our old base had noticed our presence, and we had no way to stop them in our current state, so we had to be fast. First and foremost, we had to use the remaining resources wisely, because after the raider attack, we had lost nearly everything. This meant we couldn't put any new turrets, so we started relocating the ones we already had. Then we equipped ourselves with the best weapons left behind by the raiders. Once we were ready, we took our positions and prepared for whatever was coming next. Not long after, the zombies broke through our barriers and began pouring in one by one, and on the evening of the day 98, we fought with all our strength against these creatures. With each passing second, the zombies kept getting closer, and we had started to realize this might be the end. But just as things were looking hopeless, Wendy stepped in front of the horde. Her sacrifice helped us regain our determination. She had chosen to give herself up so the rest of us could survive. Drawn by the scent of flesh, the zombies swarmed her, and in that moment, the rest of us took the opportunity and began taking them down one by one. Thanks to Wendy's final act of courage, we had survived against all odds. After clearing out the last of the zombies from our base, we gave her one final goodbye, and we made sure to remember the friends we had lost along the way. And after 100 long days of waiting, the rescue ship summoned by Protein and his fallen comrades finally arrived. After saying his goodbyes to the friends he had made, Protein entered the shuttle and left the planet behind. As for the ones who stayed, they focused on repairing the ruined base. For now, they were free from the undead, but no one knew what the future held because that was only a single bite away. So that's the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your opinion in the comments. See you in the next one. Goodbye.